Welcome to Libeth. I'm glad you're here. This week we are in 17th century Japan with the Book of Five Rings, the Go-Rin no Sho of Miyamoto Musashi. Today we take the final two themes and follow them to the end. Yesterday we traced strategy as universal skill and adaptability over rigid systems through the text, through independent traditions that confirm them, and into the contemporary world where they apply most directly. Today we take timing and positioning, and minimalism in action, the two themes that are most concretely practical, and where Musashi's thinking is most specifically grounded in the physical reality of actual combat. The translation to other domains is more demanding here, and more rewarding. Let me begin with timing, because it is the concept around which the fire scroll is organized, and it is the one that Musashi considers most decisive in actual confrontation. He begins from the blunt, almost startling claim that everything has rhythm. Not only blades and battle cries, he says, but music and commerce and craft have timing. Everything rises and falls, tightens and slackens, has moments when it is moving and moments when it is stopped. That observation is the fire book's engine. Timing is not some added ornament on skill. It is the medium in which skill lives. If you accept that, then timing ceases to be a trick of the wrist and becomes the capacity to live inside the tempo of whatever situation you face. So in sword combat, timing means more than reacting to an opening. It means hearing, with your whole body, the pattern an opponent makes, the cadence of their strikes, the habitual pause after a feint, the moment their attention narrows. Musashi pushes this into action. Strike when their rhythm is interrupted. Force a break in their tempo so that confusion opens up. Operate at a pace that they cannot comfortably match. What looks like waiting is often active creation of opportunity. What seems like a sudden cut is often the endpoint of a long sequence of tempo manipulation. Timing is the grammar of those moves. This is why the Fire Book insists you must train day and night until timing becomes your normal state. He insists also that timing exists in the void, that is, in the moments you cannot name. The same timing lives in a market's boom and bust, in a craftsman's steady hand, in a commander's sudden order. If you can see the underlying pulse, you find where to act. Timing also has a tactical vocabulary that Musashi lays out with his characteristic economy, and these terms travel farther than the dojo. Ken no Sen, the striking initiative, is attacking first to set the tempo so the other side is always responding. It is the force that fixes rhythm and forces reaction. Go no Sen, the waiting initiative, is letting the opponent commit, learning from that commitment, and striking on the information it gives you. Its advantage is clarity. Its danger is slowness when speed is required. Tai no Sen, the simultaneous initiative, is the most subtle. Both men move together, and victory goes to the one whose perception holds steady in the collision. In Musashi's world, Tai no Sen is where preparation dissolves into pure, trained perception. These three are not mere sword labels. They are the structural moves of negotiation and markets and creative work. The first mover sets the terms, the responder learns and must then compress reaction into a short window, and the one who moves with perfect timing in the clash wins because preparation has become perception. Musashi even makes the meta point. There are no other real ways to take the lead in a fight than these three. The fight for tempo always reduces to attack, wait, or coincide. The choice is concrete, and the discipline to choose it is practice. Musashi insists you do not leave timing abstract. He gives concrete rules that feel like instructions for an architecture of advantage. Stand with the sun at your back when you can, he says, so the opponent squints into light. In a house, keep the entrance behind you or to your right. Chase the foe into thresholds, pillars, places where movement is cramped. These are not just battlefield tricks. They are timing made spatial. Put another way, timing without position is impoverished. Position without timing is brittle. Which brings us to positioning, the spatial dimension of timing. Musashi's ground book draws the analogy to carpentry as if to make a stubborn point. Strategy is like building a house. The foreman chooses which timber appears and which is hidden, where the straight, handsome beam sits exposed, and where knotted wood is useful only as scaffolding. He assigns work according to ability and does not embarrass his men with impossible tasks. That practical, almost affectionate attention to materials and placement is the same attention a commander must pay to terrain, to light, to the options a field allows. A good carpenter does not insist on using his prettiest timber where it will rot. A good strategist does not fix his best assets where they cannot act. Musashi's list of positioning moves is stubbornly ordinary. Don't let your back be obstructed. Use slightly higher ground, chase the opponent to his awkward side, and that ordinariness is the point. Position is a continuously updated resource. The question is never, what is the perfect formation? But given who I face, given this terrain, and given my objective now, what position gives me the most optionality for the next moment? Musashi's foreman image makes that logic visible. You don't build the whole house at once. You place each beam where it serves the larger plan. Positioning is management of where your value is created, not a fixed formula. That makes the business parallel almost immediate. A firm that finds a market position where its particular capabilities create disproportionate value is, Musashi would say, like the foreman who puts straight attractive timber in the reveal and uses the knottier wood where strength, but not beauty, is required. You can have the best skill in the world, but if you put it where no one sees its effect, you are doing scaffolding with your talent. And the personal parity point follows. Two people with the same ability will live differently depending on where they place themselves in networks, in organizations, in tasks. Position is a strategic resource to be managed, rather than a static background to action. If timing shapes when you move, position shapes what your move can do next. Musashi's concrete cues, sun behind you, Kamiza as a higher place in a house, always try to keep the enemy to your left where you can corral him into obstacles. Make that necessity hard to ignore. He does not offer fixed rules because no rule can account for the permutations of space and opponent. He offers attentional habits that make continuous assessment possible. Now the fourth theme, minimalism in action. And this is where Musashi becomes almost impatient with aesthetics. He begins with the blunt economy of a craftsman. Every motion in combat must either accomplish a strike or prevent one. Anything else is waste. Big swings that miss are not only inefficient, they are telegraphs. They burn energy, create distance, and supply the opponent with information about your intent. Small, precise movement that does the work is superior, even if less showy. That impatience toward show is already present in the ground book, where Musashi scorns the schools that color and show off their technique, trying to hasten the bloom of the flower. He watches the dojo that makes its livelihood from display and calls it a corruption of the way. The wartime analog is clear. A parade of fancy forms wins applause, not fights. The habit of preferring signal over effect is not a failing unique to swordsmen. It is cultural and institutional. It underwrites the elaborate report that shows the labor of analysis rather than the two-line decision that changes outcomes. It underwrites the product with 15 features and 20 menus that hide the one function users actually want. To practice minimalism in Musashi's sense, you must know the precise purpose of each action and then find its minimum effective expression. He is never sentimental about simplicity. He accepts that simplicity is hard because it presumes clarity. Do nothing which is of no use, he writes among the precepts in the ground book, almost a slogan, almost a command. But that requires a level of understanding often absent. Excess action fills the space left by the absence of definite purpose. Musashi gives us a string of compact practices that let minimalism breathe. The Nai to Ikai Ryu, the one school two swords approach, is itself an argument for austere economy of means. Carry the long sword for reach and the companion sword for confined spaces. Do not be encumbered by unnecessary holds. Learn to wield a long blade one-handed when the situation demands. The two swords are not ornamental. They are tools used only where they change the outcome. That is resource allocation as a moral act. He also teaches attitude, no attitude. The idea that there are the 5 formal attitudes, but you should aim to reach a point where you have no fixed attitude at all, where posture shifts in service of cutting the enemy. The point is not to be a virtuoso of poses. The point is to reduce motion to the minimum that still achieves purpose. That is minimalism with teeth. If we bring this into a contemporary example, communication, the fit is telling. Most professional communication is padded not because the speaker needs it, but because the speaker needs to show they worked. The email that explains reasoning before stating the decision, the presentation that displays breadth rather than the next action, the strategy document that proves rigor by including every caveat. These are the telegraphed strikes Musashi derides. The minimum effective communication is not brevity for its own sake. It is calibration. Long if the purpose requires it, short if the purpose requires it, but never long in order to look thorough. This calibration requires the same clarity Musashi insists on in the dojo. Know what you seek to accomplish, and then choose the smallest set of moves that will accomplish it. That calibration is also the heart of product design. Musashi's carpenter foreman, who puts the best timber where the eye meets the beam and uses rougher wood where the structure will be hidden, is doing the same work as a designer who resists piling features into a product in order to signal cleverness. The user does not pay for your signaling. They pay with attention and patience for the feature that solves their problem. Minimalism in action is the discipline to make the user never have to guess which motion matters. This is also why Musashi's scorn of ornament is not asceticism for its own sake. His central line is practical. Waste invites vulnerability. The big flourish tells the opponent what to do next. The small, clean motion leaves the opponent with less information and fewer options, and so gives you advantage. One of the Book of 5 rings deeper tensions, and Musashi does not spell it out explicitly, but he names the parts from which it arises. Is the gap between the universality of these principles and the domain-specific craft that makes them real. Musashi insists repeatedly, know the smallest things and the biggest things. From one thing know 10,000 things. That is the claim of universality. He also insists that the way is in training, teach your body strategy, and do nothing which is of no use. These are commands about practice. The paradox is obvious when you try to live them. You can understand rhythm across chess, markets, and music in principle, but you do not gain the perceptual patterns that make timing work in negotiations unless you practice negotiating. And you do not gain the ability to see the split-second opening in a market without being in markets. Put more sharply, Musashi's universal principles are like a grammar. Domain practice builds the fluency. The fire book shows timing as a grammar. The water book insists you must train until the grammar is fluent in your body. He warns against learning the outputs, the list of maxims, without the trial of opposing resistance. He condemns the schools that teach technique as if technique were the way. That condemnation is precisely a warning to us. Principles without practice are slogans. Because of that, the Book of Five Rings should be carried as a diagnostic framework rather than a recipe. Use its four pressures: perceive clearly, stay adaptive, attend to timing and position, act minimally, as questions you ask of your practice. Are you seeing what is actually here or only what you expected to see? Are you clinging to a tool that worked before, or responding to what this situation requires now? Are you acting at the moment that matters, or at the comfortable moment? Are you doing the minimum that achieves the purpose, or doing extra to signal effort? Musashi gives us ways to test those questions in action. He says, "Do not think dishonestly," and places training before theory. He tells us to hold down a pillow, to stop the opponent's head rising, which in practice means anticipate and suppress the opponent's useful actions while letting trivial ones go, then to cross at a ford, to pick the point of attack that best suits your means, and to make the mountain sea change. When a method fails twice, change your approach. These are not aphorisms for posterity. They are operational judgments that you test in the heat of conflict. That last point matters because it defines the book's pedagogical stance. Musashi's text is short on academic abstraction and long on compact practices and metaphors. Carpenter and foreman, the kamiza and the sun behind you, the two swords at your hip. Those concrete things are what let his universal claims bite. They force you to imagine the work of strategy, the placement of timber, the chasing of an enemy into a threshold, the choice of which sword to draw, and in that imagination you see how practice must shape principle. To carry the book forward, then, take the four principles as habits of inquiry, and let the practice make them your instincts. Notice where you're signaling more than acting. Notice where you have posture but not effect. Notice where you can trade motion for information. Remember Musashi's blunt pairing of pen and sword. The warrior should have both, but the pen without the test of opposition is only decoration. Remember also the final image he likes to return to: the body of a rock, unmoved by 1,000 things. That is not the refusal of motion. It is the steadiness born of practice that lets you move with exactness when the rhythm opens. Be careful, too, of a different error Musashi warns against: the extraction of the principles into a neat packet of quotes, and the sale of that packet as wisdom. He sees the schools that self-form and calls them decadent. The risk for us is identical. We can clip Musashi for a slide deck and never put our hands on the weight of the work. He wants practice to be central. His last book, The Void, frames the paradox. The way is at once everything and nothing. You must know the things that exist to apprehend the void. The void is realized only when the clouds of bewilderment clear from practice. The truth of the principles emerges in the body that has been trained until perception and action are one. What to carry from the Book of 5 Rings? The 4 principles: perceive clearly, remain adaptive, attend to timing and position, act minimally, as a framework for assessing your practice in whatever domain you are working in. Not as rules to follow, but as questions to ask. Am I seeing what is actually here, or what I expected to see? Am I attached to a method that worked before, or responsive to what this situation actually requires? Am I acting at the right moment, or the convenient moment? Am I doing what the situation requires, or am I doing more than that because more signals effort? What to be careful of? The reduction of the Book of 5 Rings to a collection of quotable principles, extracted from the practice that gives them content and applied as wisdom rather than as the results of tested understanding. Musashi would identify this as exactly the failure he diagnosed in the sword schools, taking the outputs of insight and transmitting them as if the outputs were the insight. The principles are real. The practice is what makes them real to you. Without the practice, you have words. That's all for today on Libeth. Next Monday, we begin a new book. If you want to follow the whole journey, subscribe. A new book every week. At least we try.